Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and also ring the bell to be notified of every future upload. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be talking about the top 10 things that you need when you have a hamster. These are all just my opinions and just what I believe that you should have prepared before you decide to bring a hamster into your home. It would just be the most responsible thing that you can do as a pet owner. So if you would like to see my top 10 things, be sure to just keep on watching. So the first thing that you need is an enclosure. The minimum enclosure size that you need for a hamster is 450 square inches of floor space. So this would be about a 40 gallon tank. If you're using an aquarium, this would be, you want to go no smaller than the 40 gallon tank. Most of these critter tails cages that you see in these pet stores are not suitable for your hamster. Please do not get them. I do not recommend them. They offer no space, and by the time you be able to add everything that your hamster needs for a suitable size, you will soon realize that these do not give you enough space to do so, which is the big problem with them. Your hamsters need plenty of space to be able to walk around, run, and just be a hamster. You have to remember also that a hamster is spending so much time in their enclosure that you want to make sure it's large enough, because a lot of hamster owners do experience their hamsters becoming bored in their cage. Some hamster owners' cages can be so big and DIY, but they can also find that their hamster still exhibiting signs of being bored and wanting more space. An example that I have of that is Victoria Rachel's channel. Her recent video, she shared her hamster needed more space, so she had to upgrade his enclosure. I believe it was Dipper, but I could be wrong. But I will link that up here and also leave it down in the description box below. So just because you think that hamsters are small, or because you're getting a dwarf hamster that they don't need that much space because they're smaller than the Syrian, that does not mean that the cage can be small as well. You really want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. So it's recommended to have your cage already before you go and buy your hamster, just so that there's no problems happening in between the time. Because those starter cages that people like to do, there's not really a big point for them. I find it almost an excuse to not have a cage, because you feel like, oh, they won't be here long, so it's okay if it's way too small. It's okay if it's just this critter trail cage, because I'm eventually getting something else. But sometimes when you say that, or you're thinking that, time can go by so much faster, and before you know it, it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or maybe a year before you actually get to upgrade their cage, which is completely unfair to your hamster. Hamsters will be there in the future when you get your cage. So just be sure to keep that in mind, and there's nothing wrong with waiting if you don't have the time or the space. So number 2, the next thing that you want to have prepared is bedding. Hamsters need about 6 inches of bedding. You would like to use paper-based bedding, Aspen bedding. You really want to stay away from pine and cedar bedding, just because it is very harmful to your hamsters. You have to remember that they're small, so their respiratory systems are not as high or well as, say, for larger animals. So you do have to keep that in mind with their bedding. You really want to make sure that it's dust free as well, just because, like I mentioned, the respiratory, so you want to keep the dust to a minimum. If you find that you are using bedding and it has a lot of dust coming out to where even you're sneezing and you're seeing it coming up in the air, you really want to recommend looking at different options, because there are a whole bunch of different options that you can choose from different pet stores and online. You'll be surprised. Some people also like to use tea bag bedding. So when you're buying your bedding, just make sure you keep all of those things in mind. Even if you don't have the entire enclosure set up to have 6 inches the minimum of bedding depth, at least give them at least half or 1/4 at least. I really would say half. You really want to make sure they have at least half of it where it slopes up like this to higher bedding, just so that they still have the option to burrow underneath, because hamsters do spend a lot of their time underneath the bedding. So just so that they have no time to burrow, well, have enough space to be able to burrow and make their tunnels as they wish. So you really want to be able to give them that chance too. But I know some people like to put lower bedding on certain areas, just because their items, sometimes the lid won't fit if all the bedding's so high. So that is another way that you can do your bedding if you would like. But of course, if not, and you have the height for it, definitely think about doing 6 inches of bedding going throughout the whole enclosure. and as well as putting hay in between each layer of bedding just to help stabilize the burrows even more. Hamsters usually don't eat the hay that's in there, but it's perfectly fine if they do, but they usually don't aim to eat it. So if you see them munching on, there's something to worry about, but most hamsters really don't mind it, but it does help stabilize their burrowing a little bit. And another tip that I want to give that I use with hay is I like to put like a decent size amount in like a container in their enclosure, and when I scatter feed them, I actually would put some food up in there or like treats inside the hay, but not like too far into the hay, just to make it a little easier for them so that they know. But I like to put like a little bit of food or treats inside of it just to give them like a bit more of a foraging toy, if it makes sense. That way it gives them almost the mimicking of if they're outside and they're eating from the grass, like eating around looking for the food. It kind of gives the whole types of options, because most foraging toys are geared for more guinea pigs and rabbits, like a little bit more larger animals. So just with the hay, I like to put in a container, put some food up in there, and then just let them just let them forage for their food. It's just really enriching for them, and I found that Rhino actually really likes it. Every time I do it, he does always find it, which is good. So I know that he's actually enjoying going around in there, sniffing through, looking for the food. And number 3, we are going to talk about toys. Hamsters need plenty of toys. You really cannot give them too many toys, in my opinion, especially to be able to rotate them around just so that they don't get bored of one toy so fast. So usually when I do a monthly deep cleaning, I'll sometimes like to switch around some toys. I'll probably take something out, put something else in that they haven't had in a bit, just to keep things new and fresh from getting it so repetitive to them. Because they are spending so much time in there, you really want to be able to keep it new and exciting for them. Hamsters really do get bored very, very easily, in my opinion. So I feel like the best way to keep that from happening is switching things around. I also recommend giving them chewing sticks. You got Whimsies, logs, applewood sticks. You can give them Whimsies to chew on to help break down their teeth, because hamsters' teeth are naturally always growing, so you want to make sure that you're keeping those down by giving them different options to choose from between chewing. So I like to try to at least have maybe about 2 or 3 different textures of chews for them, just in case if they're not in the mood to chew wood, they don't have to chew wood. In case they're not in the mood to chew a certain type of texture, they could choose something else, just because you never really know what your hamster feels like doing, or what they actually want to have. So it's really nice to be able to give them different options and different textures to be able to chew on. So just because an item is geared towards hamsters does not mean that it's okay for them, doesn't mean that it's the right size for them. It does not mean that material is even safe for them. Sometimes companies are completely wrong in these things, so it's up to us to educate ourselves on this information and try to give our hamsters the best life as possible. And the next thing that we are now going to talk about are hides. Hamsters are naturally prey animals, so they often feel that they might need to hide. So we have to give them that chance to be able to feel safe and comfort in their own enclosure and in their home. So I like to have at least more than one hide. I have like 3 different hides for my enclosures. And I also like to use the bending bridges as a hide sometimes. If you place it against the cage for them to be able to go underneath the hide, it also works as that. But you want to make sure they have a hide to be able to go in case at any moment while they're out they might feel threatened by anything that's going on outside of the enclosure, maybe in your room. So I do recommend having as many hides as possible. Also, if it gets really hot where you are, I would recommend looking into getting a glass hide, just because you could put this into the freezer during the summers and you can help them keep cool, so that they're super hot. All they have to do is go in there, cool off, and they're feeling fine. And this is just something I like to do during the summer, just to make sure that they're not getting too hot and they have that space to be able to cool down. All I do is leave in the freezer for maybe about 10 minutes at most. It really doesn't take long to freeze up or get a little bit of cold, and I put them in there, and they love to go in there and cool off during the summertime. It's just a fun little tip. Another thing that you will want to look into is the right hamster food diet. Hamsters have so many different options, just like any other animals, of food that you as a hamster owner can choose from. But we have to make sure that we're choosing the right ones. I know PetSmart and Petco often have like I think it's like hay-filled diet, and you do not want to give your hamster those. Hamsters are not going to really absorb any nutrients or get anything from that diet, so you really don't need to use that. But I would not recommend giving them that. It can also lead to malnutrition just because they're not getting everything that they actually need. I recommend giving them the Higgins Sunburst just because it has a whole bunch of different mix of seeds. So I like to mix the Higgins Sunburst with the rat and mouse blocks just for like protein reasons. So for protein, I either give them the rat and Missouri blocks, or I will also sometimes throw in some mealworms just because those give protein as well. But if you have a dwarf hamster, I'd be careful giving them mealworms just because they're more prone to diabetes, that you want to be careful that you're not also leading up to them having it. So what I would do for my hamsters is one day I would give them Higgins Sunburst for one night. I always try to keep their routine around the same time, like whenever I feed them, give them water, just because they can get used to that, and if they want to come out to you, they can. What I would do is one day I'll feed the Higgins Sunburst to my hamster, and then sometimes I'll like skip a day and then feed them the rat and Missouri blocks, and then continue to skip a day. Because just because your hamster's food bowl is empty does not mean that they're hungry or that they ate everything. Hamsters are gathering all their food into their pouches, and they are taking it back home or wherever they want their food to be. So just because you see that bowl empty does not mean they ate everything. I know some people see the food bowl being empty right after feeding them. They're like, oh wow, they ate everything. They must be really hungry. And they're still putting more food and more food. They usually are taking that food back to the nest. So do keep that in mind. You can also give them different fruits. They got bananas, like some eggs. Of course, make sure you're not putting no seasonings in any of these things. You can feed them lettuce, not the iceberg lettuce though, just because it has too much water. But there's just a whole bunch of different fruits and veggies that you can feed your hamsters if you choose to. But if not, of course, you can stick to the regular hamster diet. And wheels. Hamsters always must have a wheel. Do not take out your hamster wheel just because you have a wheel that might be too loud. Even if it's keep you up at night, do not take out their hamster wheel. They do not deserve that. Hamsters run a lot. I know a lot of people might not think it or know it just because they are small. They might not believe it. Almost like a dog, people associate little dogs with low energy, don't need much, and bigger dogs with high energy, need a lot of space, need a backyard to run. So with hamsters, they do run a lot, which means they need to burn off all that exercise that they are getting. So make sure you're giving them the right size wheel. I have talked about all the hamster wheels. I know other channels have, so I will link those down in the description box below. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.